Hi there, second graders. How's it going? I'm here to read Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. We are on Chapter 5, Men from Mars. There was no floating inside the space hotel. The gravity-making machine saw to that. So once the docking had been triumphantly achieved, Mr. Wonka, Charlie, Grandpa Joe, and Mr. and Mrs. Bucket were able to walk out of the great glass elevator into the lobby of the hotel. As for Grandpa George, Grandma Georgina, and Grandpa Josephine, none of them had had their feet on the ground for over 20 years, and they certainly weren't going to change their habits now. So, when the floating stopped, they all three plopped right back into bed again and insisted that the bed with them in it be pushed into the space hotel. Charlie gazed around the huge lobby. On the floor, there was a thick green carpet. 20 tremendous chandeliers hung shimmering from the ceiling. The walls were covered with valuable pictures, and there were big, soft armchairs all over the place. At the far end of the room, there were 5 elevator doors. The group stared in silence at all this luxury. Nobody dared to speak. Mr. Wonka had warned them that every word they uttered will be picked up by space control in Houston, so they had better be careful. A faint humming noise came from somewhere below the floor, but that only made the silence more spooky. Charlie took hold of Grandpa Joe's hand and held it tight. He wasn't sure he liked this very much. They had broken into the greatest machine ever built by man, the property of the United States government, and if they were discovered and captured, as they surely would be in the end, what would happen to them then? Jail for life? Yes, or something worse. Mr. Wonka was writing on a little pad. He held up the pad. It said, "Anybody hungry?" The 3 old ones in the bed began waving their arms and nodding and opening and shutting their mouths. Mr. Wonka turned the paper over. On the other side it said, "The kitchen of this hotel are located with luscious food, lobsters, steak, ice cream. We shall have a feast to end all feasts." Suddenly a tremendous booming voice came out of a loudspeaker hidden somewhere in the room. "Attention!" boomed the voice, and Charlie jumped. So did Grandpa Joe. Everybody jumped, even Mr. Wonka. "Attention, the 8 foreign astronauts. This is Space Control in Houston, Texas, USA. You are trespassing on American property. You are ordered to identify yourselves immediately. Speak now." "Shh," whispered Mr. Wonka, finger to his lips. There followed a few seconds of awful silence. Nobody moved except Mr. Wonka, who kept saying, "Shh, shh." "Who are you?" boomed the voice from Houston, and the whole world heard it. "I repeat, who are you?" shouted the urgent, angry voice, and 500 million people crouched in front of their television sets, waiting for an answer to come from the mysterious speakers inside the space hotel. The television was not able to show a picture of these mysterious strangers. There was no camera in there to record the scene. Only the words came through. The TV watchers saw nothing but the outside of the giant hotel in orbit, photographed, of course, by Shuckworth, Shanks, and Scholler, who were following behind. For a minute, the whole world waited for them, but no reply came. "Speak!" boomed the voice, getting louder and louder and ending in a fearful, frightening shout that rattled Charlie's eardrums. "Speak! Speak! Speak!" Grandma Georgina shot under the sheet. Grandma Josephine stuck her fingers in her ears. Grandpa George buried his head in the pillow. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket, both petrified, were once again in each other's arms. Charlie was clutching Grandpa Joe's hand, and the 2 of them were staring at Mr. Wonka and begging him with their eyes to do something. Mr. Wonka stood very still, and although his face looked calm, you can be quite sure his clever, inventive brain was spinning like a dynamo. "This is your last chance," boomed the voice. "We are asking you once more, who are you? Reply immediately. If you do not reply, we shall be forced to regard you as dangerous enemies. We shall then press the emergency freezer switch, and the temperature in the space hotel will drop to minus 100 degrees centigrade. All of you will be instantly deep frozen. You have 15 seconds to speak. After that, you will turn into icicles. 1, 2, 3. "Grandpa," whispered Charlie as the counting continued, "we must do something. We must, quick." 6, said the voice. 7, 8. 9. Mr. Wonka had not moved. He was still gazing straight ahead, still quite cool, perfectly expressionless. Charlie and Grandpa Joe were staring at him in horror. Then all at once they saw the tiny twinkling wrinkles of a smile appear around the corners of his eyes. He sprang to life. He spun around on his toes, skipped a few paces across the floor, and then, in a frenzied, unearthly sort of scream, he cried, "Fimbo Feezy!" The loudspeaker stopped counting. There was silence. And all over the world, there was silence. Charlie's eyes were riveted on Mr. Wonka. He was going to speak again. He was taking a deep breath. "Bungo Beanie!" he screamed. He put so much force into his voice that the effort lifted him right up onto the tips of his toes. "Bungo Bunny! Dafu Dunny! Yubi Loony!" Again the silence. This time Mr. Wonka spoke. The words came out so fast and sharp and loud that they were like bullets from a machine gun. "Zunk, zunk, 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 zunk," he barked. The noise echoed around and around the lobby of the Space Hotel. It echoed around the world. Mr. Wonka now turned and faced the far end of the lobby, where the loudspeaker voice had come from. He walked a few paces forward as a man would, perhaps, who wanted a little more intimate conversation with his audience. And this time the tone was much quieter and the words came more slowly, but there was a touch of steel in every syllable. "Kirasuku Malibuku, Weeby Wise un Yubi Cuckoo, Alipenda Kakamenda, Pants Forladun Ino Suspenda, Funikika Kandarika, Weeby Stronga Yubi Wika, Porpacota, Borumoka, very risky you provoca. Kati Kati, moons und stars, Phoenicia, Venus, Mars." Mr. Wonka paused dramatically for a few seconds. Then he took an enormous deep breath, and in a wild and fearsome voice he yelled out, "Kit Mibi Zunk, Fimbolizi Zunk, Gugu Miza Zunk, Fumukaka Zunk, Anapolala Zunk Zunk Zunk." Here's a picture of Mr. Wonka. He's a funny guy, right? The effects of all this on the worlds below was electric. In the control room in Houston, in the White House in Washington, in palaces and city buildings, in mountain shacks from America to China to Peru, the 500 million people who heard that wild and fearsome voice yelling out these strange and mystic words all shivered with fear before their television sets. Excuse me. Everybody began turning to everybody else and saying, "Who are they? What language was that? Where do they come from?" In the president's study in the White House, Vice President Tibbs, the members of the cabinet, the chiefs of the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, the sword swallower from Afghanistan, the chief financial advisor, and Mrs. Tobypuss, the cat, all stood tense and rigid. They were more than a little afraid, but the president himself kept a cool head and a clear brain. "Nanny!" he cried. "Oh, Nanny, what on earth do we do now?" "I'll get you a nice warm glass of milk," said Miss Tibbs. "I hate this stuff," said the president. "Please don't make me drink it." "Then summon the chief interpreter," said Miss Tibbs. "Summon the chief interpreter?" said the police. "Where is he?" "Right here, Mr. President," said the chief interpreter. What language was the creature spouting up there in the Space Hotel? "Be quick. What is it? Eskimo?" "Not Eskimo, Mr. President." "Ha! Then it was Tagalong, either Tagalong or Ugro." "Not Tagalong, Mr. President." "Not Ugro either." "Was it Tulu then? Or Tungus? Or Tupi?" "Definitely not Tulu, Mr. President, and I'm quite sure it wasn't Tungus or Tupi." "Don't stand there telling me what it wasn't, you idiot," said Miss Tibbs. "You tell him what it was." "Yes, ma'am, Miss Vice President, ma'am," said the chief interpreter, beginning to shake. "Believe me, Mr. President," he went on, "it was not a language I've ever heard before." Here's a picture of him. "But I thought you knew every language in the world." "I do, Mr. President." "Don't lie to me, chief interpreter. How can you possibly know every language in the world when you don't know this one?" "It is not a language of this world, Mr. President." "Nonsense, man," barked Miss Tibbs. "I understood some of it myself." These people, Miss Vice President, ma'am, have obviously tried to learn just a few of our easier words, but the rest of it's language that has never been heard before on this earth. Screaming scorpions, cried the president. You mean to tell me they could be from somewhere else? Precisely, Mr. President. Like where? Said the president. Who knows? Said the chief interpreter. But did you notice, Mr. President, how they use the words Venus and Mars? Of course I noticed it, said the president. But what's that got to do with it? Aha! I see what you're driving at. Good gracious me, men from Mars and Venus, said the chief interpreter. That, said the president, could make for trouble. I'll say it could, said the chief interpreter. He wasn't talking to you, said Miss Tibbs. What do we know now, General, said the president. Blow 'em up, cried the general. You're always wanting to blow things up, said the president crossly. Can't you think of something else? I like blowing things up, said the general. It makes such a lovely, nice whoomph, whoomph. Don't be a fool, said Miss Tibbs. If you blew these people up, Mars will declare war on us. So will Venus. Quite right, Nanny, said the president. We'll be tropulated like turkeys. Every one of us will be smashed like potatoes. I'll take 'em on, shouted the chief of the army. Oh, shush, snapped Miss Tibbs. You're fired. Hooray, said all the other generals. Well done, Miss Vice President, ma'am. Miss Tibbs said, we've got to treat these fellows gently. The one who spoke just now sounded extremely cross. We've got to be polite to them, butter them up, make them happy. The last thing we want is to be invaded by men from Mars. You've got to talk to them, Mr. President. Tell Houston we want another direct radio link with the Space Hotel. And hurry. Okay, so I think this is probably our last video for the year because it's our last week of instruction. So I'm going to keep my bookmark in this and put it back on my desk. And hopefully next year we can pick this right back up where we left off. Have a good summer if I don't see you around. Bye.